What up? What up? You know what it is. I ain't gotta say it. I'm not gonna say it today. We have a very, very unique special guest. So there's no need wasting no time. We have the main attraction, the star of the event. Dr. Imani Perry is in the building on the Sean P experience for the second time.
Yes. Thank
Yes,
you for
yes.
having me.
Man, you always welcome over here, Doc. Anytime you want to talk, just say, "Hey, Sean, what's up?" And
All
we,
right.
gonna, we can go live on the spot for
All
you. You in the VIP, Doc. Let me do your official professional introduction
okay.
before we get carried away. So we have here Dr. Imani Perry is a 2023 MacArthur Fellow and receives the 2022 National Book Award for Nonfiction for South America. A journey below the Mason-Dixon to understand the soul of the nation. She is also the author of Looking for Lorraine, the radiant and radical life of Lorraine Hansberry, which received the Penn Bogart Weld Award for biography. Her book, May Forever We Stand, which is today's topic, A History of the Black National Anthem, winner of the 2019 American Studies Association John Hope Franklin Book Award for the best book in American Studies, the Hurston Wright Award for nonfiction, and a finalist for the NAACP Image Awards for nonfiction. I have none other than Dr. Imani Perry.
Glad to be with you.
Let me ask you real quick before we get started.
Yes.
Whenever you're sitting somewhere, because I saw it in New Orleans in person, when you're sitting somewhere and they're rattling off all of this stuff, how do you actually feel?
Honestly,
Yeah, honestly.
I'm eager for that part to be over so we can actually talk. I mean, I'm
Okay,
so
okay, okay.
grateful. I'm
Yeah,
grateful, of
yeah,
course. But
yes.
um, I think probably because I'm not motivated by recognition. I'm really motivated by the work. And I know so many people who've done such extraordinary work without recognition. And so I
Yeah.
try to, and so many, so I try not to focus on that. So it's a little bit, even though I'm grateful, it's a little uncomfortable because I really want to focus on the message, the
Okay,
content. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Nah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So this show is called Sitting with the Griots. And so I love to ask my guests, how do you feel about being called a modern day griot, or for the ladies, grioties, carrying that torch, carrying that storytelling tradition? Does that feel like a lot of pressure, or do you not even think about it?
It feels like an honor. I'm so grateful that so many people left behind, the elders left behind messages for me, for us. And it is an honor to be able to stand in that tradition. And I just want to do it justice. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But I feel old enough that I'm comfortable with the term now. Like
yeah.
even 10 years ago, maybe not. But once you hit your 50s, I feel like that's an appropriate term, and you're a storyteller. So yeah, feels good.
Thank you very much, and thank y'all for the chat. Sister Billy's in the building, and Dr. Ashley Wade, what's going on in the chat? Thank y'all for coming in on the lunchtime lunch break special. Um, I'm gonna give you some flowers first. Some flowers first. So I had the blessing of just seeing you in person weeks ago, New Orleans Book Festival. It was an amazing event for those that have never gone to something like that. And Billy's here in the chat. She knows we were a group of four
Yeah.
going to the event together. So we had a whole itinerary. It was like hundreds of authors, like literally a big docket of authors. I'm telling all my friends before we even get to New Orleans, like, look, I don't know what time the panel is, but whenever Dr. Monte Perry is going up, whenever that's over, I can just leave. I'm done. I'm good. And I had no idea I was gonna have you all day, every day, back to back panels at times.
Yeah.
I was in heaven.
I love that book festival. I mean, it's that, and the Mississippi one is great too. But
I'm coming. I'll be there.
yeah, I mean, I haven't been invited to that one this year, but I might
You
just.
have it.
I
I'm
don't.
going.
But
I'm going to call somebody right now.
but some of them were in New Orleans too. Some of the folks who organized that festival. I mean, it's beautiful, and because it's community, because people are eager to talk to each other, and the audience is as special as who's on stage. So yeah, and also it was just wonderful to meet you in person because I felt like we already knew each other, but there's something different about meeting in person. So
Yeah, and we'll get back to the Nola Fest later on, like the end of the show. I have a question for you
Okay.
about the book fest. But I was doing some research last night, and you said on your Amazon page that you wish that more people knew about this book.
Absolutely.
So the minute I saw that on your page at 2 in the morning, I was like, you know what? I have to ask her, what did you want them to get specifically when you said that statement?
Yeah, thank you for that. This book in many ways is my love letter to Black America, and I mean that by saying that I mean um, there are things that are in this book about Black institutions, Black schools, Black civic association, Black organization, Black culture that is under recognized in academic and scholarly work, and is also, I think, particularly for some of our young folks, is being forgotten. So when I'm telling, so in the book, when I'm telling stories about, things like Dizzy Gillespie being in Chiraw, South Carolina, one room schoolhouse, the middle of cotton country, they stand every day on the porch and sing, lift every voice and sing, right? Everybody's parents are picking cotton. That's what the kids are theoretically going to look forward to. And they have this song and they imagine a different possibility for their life. They can see their stories, their lives through the song. Their stories are part of this epic history of people who have endured, who have imagined, who have struggled. I want us to know that and hold fast to it. And I also want us to be very aware of how many organizations how tightly bound, connected we were, all the kinds of organizations we had in the pre-desegregation context, particularly in the pre-desegregation South. So the song, it's the story of the song, but it's really the story of where the song fit into Black life, which meant that I had to tell the story of Black formal culture, of Black institutional culture. And I want us to have that. I want us to cherish it. I want it to be part of how we tell our story. And I think so that's why I want people to read. It's like it's not so much about wanting people to read me as I want people to hold on to this history.
Yes. And we definitely gonna dig all up in that history today. We gotta do that. But let me ask you a question. This is the second time on the Sean P experience. We did Prophets of the Hood like 2, 3 years ago, and now
Yep.
we're doing this. Have you ever wondered why we haven't done South America? Or do you know why?
No.
Because I want people to read all of your back work. That's my
Oh,
goal. I
I'm
want
so
to put I want to put a highlight because South America was so big.
that's right.
Uh, it probably is some people's first time. Like, wow,
That's
who's this?
No, I appreciate that. Because even I was had an event the other day and somebody said to me, "Oh, I want to read your book." And I was like, "Well, which one?" Because I want, there's other, and I am grateful for the success of South America, enormously grateful. But I do want there's other work that carries other kinds of messages. So thank you for that. I really appreciate
He's like a real great artist, like a musician, and people are like ranting about this one particular album. Like, did you hear? Did
that.
you hear this? Did you go over here? Like, there's more. There's more. Someone asked you. This book was published like 6 years ago, I believe. About 6 years ago. Right. So once again, doing homework last night. Did you release 3 books that year?
I
Like
did.
the basic thing, looking for Lorraine, and this in the same year?
Yeah.
Or was that a typo?
No, it's true. It's
That's
true.
crazy.
It was crazy, and I didn't. It wasn't on purpose. So I'm working on all. South America is the first time I ever worked on one book at once. Right, I'm always working on multiple things at the same time, and I worked on each of the books for a long time. But you never know what publishing schedules are going to be like, especially with university presses. And 2 of the books were university presses. So it just never occurred to me. I just because often with the university presses, it just takes a long time. And there was a moment, and I was talking to one of my friends. I was like, "Wait a minute, these production schedules are sort of lining up. I think there might be all 3 books come out in the same year." And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's going to be wild." Yeah. So it there were 3 that year. It was a wild year.
So I see the work whenever a book comes out, I see the whirlwind that happens. The book tour and then on the TV and the podcast like this. How'd you do three?
Well, it wasn't as much of a whirlwind with any of
Oh,
those.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Looking for Lorraine was the most because that was the one that was a trade press, and I got one of the book awards that is sort of more public with that one. But even that was sort of quieter. Like now, it's hard to imagine because it feels like now Lorraine Hansberry, people like know who she is. But back then, there was even a conversation at the press about, well, will people know Raising the Sun, but they may not know her name, right? And so it just wasn't nearly as much attention. It was hard to get reviews.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something serious. This is my I can do what I want my show. For the NOLA Fest, I was seeing you at times, right? Like in between panels. I literally felt bad for you. I was like, I want to say something. I'd be like, you know what? I'm gonna leave her alone because she is doing so much in a couple of days. I'm like, I'm gonna just go over here. I'm gonna
No,
just go over here.
next time we should chop it up more.
You was doing so much.
Yeah, I was.
You was doing a lot.
So here's the thing, like you,
That was crazy.
let me tell you, like you, I read all the time. And so, like you, when I'm eager to talk to people about their writing. So as a result, when they were organized, they were like, well, have you read this? Yeah. Would you talk to this person? Of course, because I read their book. Right. So that's the fun part. It's easier than often than talking about my own work, actually. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So I love a good origin story. I love the origin, the beginning. I
Yeah.
love to hear another creative like, man, I was in the shower and thought about this thing. I was driving. So when it comes to They Forever We Stand,
Yes.
out of all the things you could have written about, because you're so skilled, what was it about this particular topic in this song
Yeah.
where it's like I'm gonna dedicate years to research,
Yeah.
interviewing, studying, and writing this? What
Yeah.
about
Sure. I mean, part of it was I couldn't believe that there wasn't a song about a book about lift every voice and sing, because I was like, this song is over 100 years old. It's probably the most cherished song in the history of Black America. Um, why wasn't there a book about it? Then I found a book about it, but the book that I did find that had been written about it was just about it from the perspective of those who had written the song, the Johnson brothers, James Weldon Johnson and Rosamond Johnson, who was the composer. And I was like, that's not the story I want to tell about the song, because I wanted to tell a story about how the song existed in Black folks' lives, not just about them, but the whole how it fit into our communities. And so I just was sort of like got obsessed with it. And then I was talked to several editors about it, and they were like, oh, that's probably an article, right? Because people were thinking about the way you tell the story of the songs. You go to the archives um, of the writers, right? Like James Weldon Johnson's papers are at the Beinecke Library at Yale, and Rosamond Johnson's has papers there too. And I was like, that's not the story. The story is actually, and this is only because of knowing Black institutions and being in Black institutions. The story is in our institutions, right? So you wouldn't. My academic training did not prepare me for writing this book. This was my community experience, right? Because you wouldn't know, right? Like there's not people don't. It's hard to
wow?
explain.
I didn't read that part of your bio for time's sake. You were
Yeah.
like so well studied, like all these things I could have rattled off. You wasn't ready with that.
Well, no, because they don't teach you. One, I'm going to be completely frank. People don't teach you to turn to Black institutions as archival sites nearly as much as they should, right? So I'm reading um, journals written by Black educators that which now with Professor Jarvis Givens, we've created the Black Teacher Archive, which is we're digitizing those journals so everybody has access to them. But if you don't know the organizations existed, if you don't know Black teachers had professional organizations and national organization and also state level organizations, then you certainly don't know that they had journals. And then you also don't know that they would write what they wrote about in these journals, right? And or if you don't know about the sort of culture of Black graduations, you don't know that people sing "Lift Every Voice" and sing at graduations. So I wouldn't have known to look into the graduation ceremony papers, right? Those kind of things that like my
Yeah,
my education did not include looking to Black institutions or Black newspapers, frankly.
we're gonna touch on that. We're
Yeah.
gonna do that. We're gonna do that. But the beauty of doing this show, I just had a guest on, doing so many shows back to back. Had a guest on like Monday.
Mhm.
She wrote the book Fashion Killer, right? How hip hop revolutionized fashion.
Yes,
And she's on here talking about how many editors turned it down, how many editors passed on it. You're like, what is a no brainer?
it's
Hip
so.
hop and clothes, like this is a home run.
Yep.
So to hear what y'all go through at this level of writing, 'cause we independent writers, but to hear what y'all go through up here is like, it's amazing.
I mean, and I think it's instructive, I should say, because sometimes what happens, I think, particularly for us in our community, is that we think, well, once you get a number of no's, that means that it's not supposed to happen or it's not going to happen for you. There's something wrong, and that oftentimes that's a sign that you have an idea that the other folks haven't yet caught up to, and so you just need to keep trying to figure out how to way to bring it into the world. Because absolutely, I mean, and I'll just even say this, which is probably not politic, but I had a contract for this book that I had to pull it from one press and take it to another press midway through. I'm so glad where it wound up, but it was a hard process. Um,
Wow. Um, I love to ask authors about their research process. Me being a nerd, I guess I love hearing the archives and everything. I want to ask you a different kind of question though, for time's sake. I want to ask you. You said in the beginning they said you couldn't find enough stuff on this topic.
mhm.
You ended up having 9,000 things you were going through. 9,000.
Yep.
So how did you weed out and cut away? Is my question. How you decide like what makes the book, what doesn't make the book?
Yeah, yeah,
It's not that big,
yeah.
literally.
That's right.
How'd you do that?
So a lot of it was sort of streamlining. So as opposed to I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but say, for example, I might have 1,000 graduation ceremonies, right? So I'm not going to talk about all of them. So I'm going to pull out which ones are representative of what Black graduations were like. Or I might have 1,000 documents that showed that they were selling the sheet music, right? And so that, you know, I only need to mention that once, but the way that all those pieces of information work is that it shows me that Black people all over the South were finding ways to purchase the sheet. You know what I mean? Like, so sort of like, so it's more like that. And then there's some stuff that you want that it's really important because it's like an aha moment. So like, Martin Luther King Jr.'s first public speech when he's 14 years old, he references "Lift Every Voice," or all the times that he referenced "Lift Every Voice" and saying over the course of his speeches of his lifetime. That really important to pull out. When James Brown sings a verse of it at a boxing match, that's important to pull out. Stevie Wonder, that like those kind of moments are important to pull out. Yes,
You did that fight the power one. I was like, wait a minute. That
yeah,
was the backbone for fight the power?
yeah, they won. Yeah, they
I had
won.
no idea about that.
And look, and Spike Lee was like, "We cannot mess with Lift Every Voice and Sing." I mean, no, sorry. Spike Lee wanted a hip hop version of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Chuck D said, "We can't mess with it, but we can do a hip hop like a song that has the same energy with hip hop," and that was "Fight the Power."
So tell me this. I love this one. This is a curveball. What was on the cutting room floor that didn't make the book that you wish was in the book? Like, man, I couldn't fit it in. We couldn't pull it off.
Yeah.
What's something that you wish was there?
So there were more pieces of artwork that referenced Lift Every Voice and Sing, like visual art. I would love to have included images of the visual art that had left. There were some beautiful fabric artists who had referenced "Lift Every Voice and Sing." Um, that's always the tricky part with books because including art is so expensive, especially if you want it to be in color. Because it really it impacted every version of, like, every part of Black artistic life, and I felt like I could have done more with that. And then some of the more recent version, like there are more contemporary jazz artists who've done versions that I wish it. And then the last thing, and this was okay, so I'll just say when I started, I thought I would see many more sort of recordings or references to Lift Up Every Voice and Sing internationally than I did. I didn't see that many, but there were more in Ghana, which makes sense because Nkrumah had been educated in the United States. I would have loved to have gone to Ghana and done more sort of deep dive on how the song exists in Ghana. And so, yeah, wish that had been in the book.
Yeah. So might be a good blog, right? A good blog post.
Sure.
What are your Atlantic articles?
Yeah, one of these days.
Shameless plug for the Atlantic. I love those Atlantic articles, by the way.
You
Whenever
appreciate
you post them and I see it, I'm going straight. Whatever I'm doing, got to stop. We're going straight to the Atlantic. It's another one.
appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's get into the actual heart and soul of the book. The James Weldon Johnson and his brother. His brother's name is
Rosamond.
Rosamond. That was Rosamond.
Yeah.
Tell us about these two brothers, but
Yeah.
more so like their parents and that community they grew up in Florida. Tell us about
Yeah.
that backbone of those guys that made them write that song. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, so they're fascinating. Like, James Weldon Johnson could give Du Bois a run for his money in terms of just being like a Renaissance man. I mean, he just did everything. So their mother was Bahamian. She was an educator. Their father was from Virginia. They'd met in New York. They also moved back to the Bahamas at a certain point together, and then they settled in Jacksonville. Jacksonville was this unusual community because it was a resort place. So while Jacksonville was a Jim Crow, it was a Jim Crow Florida, but it was gentler than other parts of the South in that time period. It was multi-ethnic, so there were Bahamians, there were Cubans, and the like, and they had this sort of kind of remarkable education, the Stanton School, which has been there's research on the Stanton School. It's incredible. James Weldon Johnson started went to Atlanta University. Rosamond went to the New England Conservatory. They both became educators, but they were also musicians. So James Weldon Johnson was the principal of the Stanton School. Rosamond worked at Florida Baptist Academy. James was the first Black person admitted to the bar in the state of Florida. He was also a musician. He was a poet. He's considered the father of the Harlem Renaissance. There's a major fire in Jacksonville, which is why they moved up to New York and they began to work on Tin Pan Alley and et cetera, right?
These guys are incredible. Like,
Incredible.
It should be a movie.
Multilingual. Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. And Rosamond wrote operas. I mean, they just sort of did. And so also James Weldon Johnson is the first Secretary General of the NAACP, which is really important because, and I just want to stop for a minute and say this, because there are people who think that Lift Every Voice and Sing became known as the Negro National Anthem because of the NAACP. And that's not right. So the NAACP adopted the song as its official song in 1919. But Black people were already calling it the Negro National Anthem before the NAACP adopts it as its official song. And in fact, the NAACP really only becomes a Black organization in the 19 teens. It's this multiracial organization largely led by white people that gets these state chapters. When James Weldon Johnson is the Secretary General, he's setting up local chapters with other people who work for the NAACP in the South. My theory is that part of the reason they adopt Lift Every Voice and Sing is because it's a way of signaling that they're a Black organization, that we are going to adopt the song that Black people have already claimed as our anthem. And that claiming of it as an anthem is sort of organic, but it happens a lot through Black women's organizations, National Association of Colored Women, and the sort of state levels who are pushing the song out into Black communities, pasting it in the back of hymnals, sharing it with schools. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Incredible. I had a question I had from last. Weldon Johnson named a lot, a whole lot. Why isn't his brother name as known?
Yeah,
Like,
that's such a good question. It's largely because I think our music education isn't as robust as it used to be. So he's a musician. He didn't write a lot. He wrote a few essays, but James Weldon Johnson, he wrote novels, he wrote essays, he wrote critical books. He's a scholar. He's an artist, all that stuff. Rosamond is a musician. Incredible. Yes.
so do you know why I asked you about this interview? Do you know what sparked me to ask you about this interview?
What? No.
I was looking at South America, the chapter on Florida, of course, and you said that Zora Neale Hurston said that James Weldon Johnson was the whitest black man in America, or something to that.
Yeah, she did.
So that one sentence, that one line, made me take the book like, close it, pick the phone up, not be Imani Perry.
And
That's where that came from.
she was ornery. They were both incredible. Um, beef, like, I think sometimes, especially now, right, when we see beef between people who we think are amazing, we think, why could, how could that be? It's always been the case, right? There are amazing people who do not like each other and who do not like each other's work. And Zora, James Weldon Johnson was formal, and she was Zora. She liked, um, vernacular Black culture, speech style, both, but she was also a serious, serious scholar, a serious intellectual. They had different ways of sort of existing in their Blackness. Um,
And I had a question that somebody asked me this morning to ask you about. What was the source on that information? What was the source on the beef? Do you
oh,
recall?
I mean, it was kind of, I don't remember the exact citation, but it came from the sort of the Renaissance stuff. I mean, you know, they part of what happened with Zora is, and also gender stuff. There were a lot of the them were kind of gatekeepers, and kind of pushed her to the side. She really disliked the middle class Florida culture in particular, and how she was treated. She had attended Florida Baptist Academy and hated her time there. It was a boarding school. Her father actually wound up not being able to pay the tuition. She sort of almost wrote it out of her story that she told of her life. Like, she did not want to be affiliated. She didn't like Jacksonville. She liked Eatonville. She didn't like that kind of kind of bougie, aspirational, kind of Black folks space. Um, and she was ornery. And I think it's important. I love Zora, but she. Let me tell you this quick story. She was at once at oh child, I'm trying to think, Sterling Brown's house, and he loved her, and he also loved Black vernacular culture. And he had a white carpet, and she put out she knocked the ashes out of her cigarette into his carpet, and put her shoe to the white carpet, and moved her shoe around, and was like, she was like, you got a roach problem, right? She was difficult, right? And that sort of ended their friendship. It did,
That's
but
great.
yeah, it's great. Can you imagine?
Um,
Sorry.
no, that's a great story. I appreciate that. I was telling Dr. Wade in the chat last year. We were discussing Dr. Carter G. Woodson,
Yes.
Miseducation of a Negro, and I was telling her whenever I read different books about Dr. Carter G. Woodson, like he didn't have a lot of friends.
No.
Like he rubbed a lot of feathers the wrong way. He was a lot of like you said, a lot of those guys at that time. They felt like, well, I'm an intellect, I'm smart, I'm whatever, so
Right.
I'm that too. I'm him, as they say. You
Right.
know,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and
they had a little spice to them, a little razzle.
and we have to keep in mind what we think about the pressures that we experience, but they are doing what they're doing with the reality of of unabashed white supremacy, lynching, Jim Crow, constant insult, financial strain, the people who actually give you financial opportunities, often trying to control what you are going to do and say, um, Black institutions also, because of their conservatism, often putting pressure on folks and people having to leave, or the surrounding white community, right? So it makes sense that people would be kind of spicy. Yeah, it was hard. It was hard.
So another reason for this show, the reason why I bought this book last year, I've been researching black schools a lot the past
Yeah,
few years. The old traditional, before integration black schools. Whenever
yes,
I talk to the elders in my life privately, they all say the best education they ever got was before integration. Then
absolutely.
whenever I ask other people that know about older times, same thing.
Yep.
Matter of fact, I've never heard one vote for integration, to be totally honest, on this podcast. So tell us about some of the education that they was getting in
Yeah.
these old traditional schools you had in chapter three. Just
Yeah.
breaking some of that down.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I think, one, the educators they had these state-based and a national organization, and part of what they talked about is what are best practices. They wanted Black children to get the highest level of education possible. So they're figuring out, not just like how to do a sophisticated curriculum, but to sharing with each other. How do you figure out how to educate kids who have to be in the fields for half the year? How do those kinds of questions? How do you make sure that every child in the classroom learns? How do you facilitate this knowledge being distributed to the entire community? Those are the kinds of things that they're thinking very seriously about. Um, and I and also producing literature for Black kids, right? So this is one of the things that I think, we don't adequately know, but there are books being written for Black children in the 20s and the 30s. And they're often telling stories of Black people, not just in the United States, but across the world. So you have Black children's literature that are talking about the Dahomey and the Ashanti and life in Haiti. And so this kind of concerted collective effort to educate Black children is incredible. And then what happens and this is why Zora actually is one of the people who's very skeptical of desegregation. So is Du Bois. They were both like, do we really trust our children to be in schools with these people who hate us so much, right? We're asking this question. And it's also the reality that before Brown, the cases leading up to Brown v. Board of Education were primarily about equalization. They were not about desegregation. But what you have ultimately is legal desegregation and de facto segregation remaining because of massive white resistance. Then you also have the loss of Black institutions. You have 90% of Black principals losing their jobs. You have a critical mass of Black teachers losing their jobs. You have Black athletic directors losing their job, Black band directors losing their job because white people do not want to be integrated into Black schools, right? They just will allow Black children schools that had been for white kids, and then white people move to the suburbs and create segregation academies. So it's an incredible loss of Black institutional life and culture that was the consequence. So of course, now, the schools were one thing. The other stuff was like being able to go into public facilities and buses and voting and all those sorts of things. So um, the last thing I'll say about this, though, is that one of the things that I think we really want to do with the Black Teacher Archive is emphasize Black teachers sacrificed for desegregation because many of them were active in the NAACP. They were active in this desegregation struggle, knowing they were savvy. They were not that they were going to lose something um, for what they would offer Black people in the nation at large.
Man, that's powerful right there, man. That's powerful. It's not talked about enough with the integration conversation. And you saying the kids getting bused to the school and all this stuff. Nobody talks about the principals and the assistant principals, teachers,
Yes,
school board, other parts of education. It's not talked about. What happened to those people?
devastating to our educators, to a class of Black professionals. Yeah,
My goodness. And then for a lot of cities too, what those black schools were, they're just like old abandoned buildings in a lot of places. This is like dilapidated.
yeah,
It's,
yep,
it's like the town's eyesore. That was a black school. Like
yes. Well, and
that's
in
horrible,
recent
man.
years again, because they're closing schools now again. Black schools are being closed all over the country yet again.
Yes, they are. Yes,
Organization.
they are.
So we're going through it again in recent history. Which, yeah, it's a repetition.
The area where I lived at, real fast. The junior high I attended, in my grandfather's day, it was the black high school.
Mhm.
They're closing it like next school year. They're closing that school.
Yeah.
It's a school where I work at, this particular city I work at, middle school. They're closing that school pretty much. So they're taking all those middle grade kids and just putting them at the high school. They're closing those schools down, left and right.
And schools are community-based institutions, and this is part of why I want to talk about the importance of schools, because we talk historically a lot about the importance of churches, of course, in Black communities, but schools did a lot of the same work, right? So they were gathering spaces, they were community spaces, and so there's a huge cost to losing that, not just because they're important to us, but that's how you build trust and interdependence in a community, is you have to have places for that. When you don't have that, it's much harder to get the kind of tight fabric of a community that you need to
Yeah,
struggle, right?
yeah, yeah. Because besides church service on Sunday, in school, so many other events are happening all week long
Yeah.
at all times of day at those spaces.
Yes. Yes. When they're right, when they, and especially when we control the spaces. But when we
Yeah,
don't control them anymore,
yeah. We having our health fair over there. We having the Deltas and the AKAs got something going on, and we doing our thing. We barbecuing. We playing baseball in the field.
yes. Yes,
You,
that's
you, you lose it all.
yeah.
You lose it all. Besides the school conversation, I wanted to talk to you about the black press. I've
Yes.
been years curious about black press. You said back in this time they had thousands of black press. Thousands. So I noticed studying these different movements, every movement had a priority to having their own press. Whether that be Marcus Garvey, Black Panther, of course the Civil Rights Movement, like tell us about the importance that they knew of black press.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, the press is one, how we circulate information that we need in our community. And it's also a way to establish knowledge. So it's not as much in this, but I've written about it in other places more. But you have to think about, after emancipation, um, Black folks have freed themselves by, running behind, the line, join the Union Army, fighting, right? And it is an opportunity to write ourselves into history, right? And I think that's for Black Americans, the thing that is really unusual is that we became a people in a context where we were not considered legal persons. We're not recognized as people, legally speaking. But there's something that happens in emancipation where we're like, okay, we get to tell who we are. And so there are newspapers that began even before emancipation, but this idea of like sort of a passion for telling our story becomes an integral part of the culture. And so we have these, I mean, just so many newspapers that distribute information. And the thing that I think people, again, don't understand about us in particular, and I mean US based Black people, is that those papers were telling domestic stories or small town. They were also telling international stories. They were talking about what's happening in the rest of the Black world. There was a sense that we had a linked fate with what was happening to Black people on the African continent, in the Caribbean, in Europe, and the like. And so Black Americans were informed about the whole world in ways that were contradicting what were frankly often lies and racist lies that are being told in the mainstream press. The Black press is incredibly important. The digitization of Black newspapers has transformed what we can do in terms of writing the histories of Black people. That's what I'm always telling students. Go to the newspapers. There are so many stories there.
Right, right. I love hearing the stories like the Pullman Porters in the Pullman Porter book I was reading, but also the Chicago Defender book,
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
700-page book. But
It's so, yeah, it's an amazing book.
just hearing their their energy, they wanted to read so bad, and hearing these little small rural areas, and the train passing by, and the man on the back of the train throwing the papers off the back
Yes.
of they in the field scooping up the paper like take it back to the barbershop, take it back to the community, take it back to the hood.
And reading together. I mean, how
Yeah,
beautiful is that? That's beautiful. It's an
like
incredible.
just how much they will do anything to read. I can't remember. I get it wrong every time. Might have been Booker T. Washington. Like walking down the street, finding little things on the ground to pick up and put it for later, and I'm gonna find a way to go and read and hide and read. They wanted to read so bad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just admire that about
I
the people of that time.
it's our and and I think this is why I'm always telling, especially now with we have book bans and all kind of hostility to Black literature. And I'm always thinking about people when they in slavery times, that reading, that literacy could lead to death, right? And Black people were still who were enslaved are still learning to read. It's an incredible, because it was a sign of being free. You could, and my uncle Cornelius will always say this. He's always like, I can read, I can teach myself to do anything.
Wait a minute.
Huh?
Your uncle name is what?
Cornelius.
My grandfather's name is Cornelius.
Really? That's what
Cornelius Lewis.
family. That's one of my Cornelius. Wow, that's one of my family names. We have a lot of Corneliuses.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Wait till my mom see this show. She has school teacher right now, but wait till she see this show later. You heard that, mom?
yeah. But I think him saying that when has always stuck with me. Like reading is the pathway to so much independence, to so much possibility. Yeah,
Let's keep it rocking and rolling. You had this term in the book, black formalism. I've
yes,
never seen it used the way you used it. Could you break down for our wonderful audience
yeah,
black formalism and what that entails? I love when you broke that down.
yeah. Okay, so one of the things that this book I was trying to do is, and this is the sort of academic piece. We talk and write a lot about Black informal culture, vernacular culture, right? Hip hop. That was my first book was about hip hop, right? Or, what we do socially. But every community has formal culture, right? The rituals, the time and place when you're supposed to, in our own language, act right, right? You dress formally, you have rituals, you have ways of doing things. And I talk about Black formalism in the sense of um, the singing of Lift Every Voice and Sing was part of Black formalism. We see it in graduation ceremonies. We see it in our civic associations, our fraternities and sororities, our clubs. We all have these formal rituals. If you ever go to a program at a Black, the Martin Luther King Jr. breakfast always has these formal spaces that are not really talked about in written form that much except with churches. And so for me, part of the point was to speak to Black formal culture. And there's a danger if we only talk about the informal, the vernacular, the social, and not talk about the formal, you don't get the full scope of what Black culture is and Black life is, right? And so it's really, for me, it's really important to talk about that part too, right?
Um, my friends and I, for years in private, talk all the time about like seeing a person go to a job interview and they're like just not job interview ready.
Yeah.
But it's almost like
Yeah,
privilege, right? Like we take it for granted how we were raised
that's right.
in those settings. So where to us it's a no brainer going to a job interview, like who don't know what to wear.
Right.
Or even at work, literally. Or
Yes, yes.
even like going to a funeral. You ever go to a funeral lately? Like y'all wearing what to a funeral? Or
Well,
to a wedding?
okay, so here's the thing. I'm just because I feel the same way, but people will tell me, oh, that's just respectability politics. And I'm like, it's not, because respectability politics, we take it from the way Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham in her extraordinary book, Righteous Discontent, talked about it, is that respectability is about a putting a face forward for white folks, right? A certain kind of presentation. Formalism is really about a kind of internal sense of dignity. They're connected, but they're not the same. And I do like time and place. So, as an example, now when my children shake hands of elders, almost always they comment on, "Oh, you looked me in the eye. You had a firm handshake." It's just cultural socialization. It's like being raised a particular way. And I do think I do think that having formal rituals, ways in which presenting yourself is important. And every community has it. Everybody has it, right? It's not about assimilating, it's just about dignity.
And we'll get into that toward the tail end of the conversation. But like, yeah, just simply nobody telling you what to do per se. You just attending church on a regular basis. Like, okay,
Mhm.
I even own a suit. First of all, if you're not going anywhere, you don't even own a suit or some dress shoes or a
Right,
tie.
right.
I go so many places and grown men in the bathroom like, man, could you help me tie my tie? Could you tell me the time? Guys older than me. We in the bathroom like
They need a clip.
they haven't picked those things up.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
got those things, how to set the table
Yeah.
properly.
Hmm.
With the cutlery and whatnot. Like you get those things from the
Yeah.
black organization.
Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that if you don't have them that you're inferior, but it is a way
No,
at all. It's just a way. It's just a way of expressing your own value. There's time and place where it's important to have special moments, moments where you are treated specially, the way you present yourself in a special ways. That's all. Yeah.
so help the audience understand. In this book, you did a good job giving the history, almost decade by decade, as the world is changing, society, politics, what's happening to us. That song carries so much weight, no matter what changed for so long. How prevalent was that song? They had remixes, they had different iterations.
Yeah. What do you mean? Like, well, say that again. Like, what do you mean
I'm
about?
sorry. I just want the audience to understand how
Yeah.
strong that
Oh,
song
yeah.
was. Like, it was sung all the
It's
time.
so I mean, it's amazing, right? Because there are these several moments in the book where I could see it like fading, right? So the song is really powerful all through the sort of the first half of the 20th century. In the context of the civil rights movement, the freedoms when there are sort of significant numbers of white Americans who are coming to the South to organize, and also Black people from northern places, because it's really largely it's not exclusively, but it's heavily a Southern history. The song. Um, and people don't know the song necessarily who are coming from these other places, and the freedom songs are like the civil rights movement. We think about the songs people are singing in marches, they're shorter, they're improvised on, and so it seems like Lift Every Voice and Sing is like kind of easing back, it's less prominent. Then you get to the Black Power movement and it is right back there, right? And it is part of the moment where formal legal desegregation has happened, but in many ways, white America has refused the invitation of the civil rights movement for real integration. And I really, this is really important to me because the story is always like, oh, Black people got radicalized. Black people had to turn back inwards, similarly to after Reconstruction, because of massive resistance, because of the backlash against civil rights. And what people turned to was the older traditions. So now you have people singing Lift Every Voice and Sing again, but with their fists raised, right? It's a different, or with the afro, with the dashiki on. And what's amazing is that the song still works in that era. It still speaks to our story. And so yeah, so it
You
keeps
know,
being reborn.
you know what frustrated me? You know what frustrated me? I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it 'cause it's my show. I'm gonna say it.
Okay.
The part where you said Bill Clinton was at this event singing the song word for word, line for line, right? All three stanzas. But not many of the black people in that particular room can get past the first, like I guess the first verse.
Yeah.
But Bill Clinton coming there, he doing this Bill Clinton thing and trying to be down all the time, right? I
Yeah.
was reading the book like I could have just took the book and just.
Thrown it.
I was so mad when I read that.
Yeah.
It's so disappointing.
Yeah. I
But
mean, and
but
even now, it's in recent years it's worse. Where Black public figures often don't know the song. Um, but it's also, I mean, when I speak to young people, unless they're you know, from the South or from like places like Detroit, Newark, maybe Philly, um, Chicago, many of them don't know the song, right? It's not something that has
sure,
been held on to
it has.
uh,
It has.
adequately. And I also don't want to. The thing that people are sometimes surprised about is I'm not saying that we need to hold on to this song. I'm saying that what this song provided is something we need
Yeah,
to hold on
the
to.
traditions and the yeah.
So if it's another song,
So
cool. But we do
that's
need that kind
yeah.
of community.
I do want to go to that part, right? We're not spoiling the book for anybody, but toward the backside of the book, it does get to a point where critical things are happening and the impact of the song is kind of waning and it is kind of dissipating. It really, really hurt to read that part of the book. Like, we got to get this back, man. Like you said, the culture and the energy.
The culture is the thing,
Yeah.
right?
How do we get it back, Doc? How do we get it back? What do you think?
Well, so part of what I talk about in the beginning of the book is this term associational life, which is black folks pre-desegregation belonged to many, many organizations, community-based organizations. White Americans did too. Like that's part of American culture, is to belong to organizations. And that's sort of fallen to the wayside. But for communities that struggle, not belonging to organizations has a more deleterious effect. It hurts us more when we're not networked to people in our community. So you don't get those kinds of rituals if you don't have people doing things with each other, right, on a regular basis. Now, people are overwhelmed, people are constantly working, people are trying to make ends meet. But there's no question in my mind that we actually need to have community networks that are more robust to face all of the challenges we're facing. And that is it's just essential. You can't and it's not you can't have political movement, but you also can't adequately provide for our young people unless we are in networked community. Now, if I knew really how to do that, I'd be in a different line of work. That's what I would be doing. But I
Right.
do know that that's what we need, you know.
Do you think the pandemic made it worse? Like, this is 6 years ago, right? I wanted to ask you early in the book, what would you change now? How do you feel about it now? Or do you feel like you said what you said? Did you change anything? Do you feel differently?
No, I mean, I just want more people to write about it. Like, I think, so I'm good with the book that I wrote, but I hope people pick up. And every time I write a book, I'm always thinking, this is an invitation. This is not a final word. So I hope that people continue on with it and say things and see things that I didn't see. So I hope more people write and think about Lift Up Your Voice and Sing. So there have been other versions that have been recorded since then. The pandemic absolutely made it worse.
All the isolation and
Yeah,
I think churches are still trying to recover their numbers from churches. People haven't returned back, and
just
people
school
have gotten
life.
comfortable being
Yeah, yeah,
apart in the way in this.
it's hard. I mean, I
It
don't,
is.
and I never want to be. We have a habit in our community of like we like to talk a lot about what's wrong with us, and so and it's just a rhetorical thing, and I always try not to do that too because we have a lot of adversity, we have a lot
Yes,
of
yes,
challenges,
yes,
but I do think there's something that we need to be in conversation, try to figure out how do we restore our networks, our habits
yes.
of being together.
Because I love reading biographies, right, and autobiographies, and I see that common trend. Most people they were reverend something, and they were like a principal or a teacher,
Yeah.
and they were like an alpha or a delta.
Mhm.
Like the holy three
Yeah.
seem to always be there with all of these prominent people,
Yeah.
and they were very political.
Yes.
So that's cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and I think and the thing about it is, it's so interesting you say that because I keep thinking about, uh, how the best biographies are the ones where we see how people are connected to larger so we tell their story, but by telling their story, you get all these other stories, right? Because greatness emerges in community. Um, yeah, yeah.
Because I internalized so many of these things, right? So I found out, like last year, my great grandmother going to the graveyard to clean up the tombstone and stuff. And at one point, she was like a superintendent in the area for the school and all this educational stuff. On her tombstone is a star. She was an Eastern Star.
It's an Eastern
I never knew that.
Oh,
I'm like, she was an Eastern Star. It felt like Lovecraft Country or something, like a movie, like finding a hit. Like, wait a minute, I know what that is.
but see, also that ritual you describe of cleaning the graveyard,
Yes,
like
ma'am.
that's our culture that for many that is also being lost in many ways, right? So you just had the discovery because you're participating in the
Yeah,
rituals of our community, right?
right. You out there finding like, wow, he was in World War I, and this person was.
Yeah.
You out there, it's uncovering
Yes.
so many things, and you're doing that past history. Before we leave, I had a very, very important question for you. Back to the the Book Fest, right?
Okay.
I've been bragging about this for the past what? Is it 3 weeks? I don't know how many weeks. You were the moderator of various panels. Dr. Perry, I did not see any notes. I didn't see an iPad. I didn't see your cell phone. I'm there the whole time. My homeboy Kofi is there. He's also a writer, podcast host, interviewer. I'm elbowing him like, Kofi, I don't see no notes. I'm like, how are they do every panel? I'm like, bro, I don't see how they doing this.
Yeah.
How did you do it? Is the question. Okay, you can't tell. I
No,
don't mess it up.
no, that's a good question. I think for me, I don't know for everybody. For me, the books of the people who I talk to, I love those books. I love those books. And so they are part of me. And so I could just talk about I could just talk about them off the cuff at any time because there are pieces of those books that, like, when there are scenes in Jesmond's Let Us Descend, I'll never forget those scenes. And so
Okay, okay.
I can just pull them up. Also, you know, also everybody I talk to, I have spent time with in other contexts talking about their work that wasn't formal. So it also, I
So
went
you know this.
conversations. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Yeah. Like I had been with Drew Foss. I had been with her in Boston a year ago. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, it's
I'm
that,
glad you answered that question. I've been for weeks. Every show, I can't imagine doing a show I have notes and everything like that. I can't imagine doing this with like nothing. I
if
just
I give a lecture, I need notes. But if I have talking about somebody's book, I often don't need notes. I just
so coincidentally back to Monday interview, the author said that she does hip hop journalism, other kind of journalism, prominent press. She said her very first interview ever. That's major. She would push a T the rapper. She got her notes and everything on her phone. He immediately takes her phone. He said, "I'm sitting right here.
I want to talk to you. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sitting right here." And he made her.
Be present.
So she said that like midway in the interview. And from that point on, I'm sitting there in real time, like, all right, then, well, you know what? How about this? Like, what? Forget my notes.
Yeah.
Just trying to pick up on. It's like Jay Z without writing. It's like, how y'all doing it? I want to learn.
Oh, we broke up for a minute. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
I
You
could hear
good?
you for a second. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, and I think, but there is something about just being present with the person,
Mhm.
But you do, but I mean, you have notes or not, you are doing an incredible job of being so attentive to writers, and I'm so grateful for you and the work that you
Oh, look at that, man. You made me cry on the camera, Dr. Perry. Look a black man blush. Nah. But I appreciate your time and your energy, your effort. I'm always grateful for the yes, because doing this kind of job, you get a lot of no's. I'm always thankful. Every yes I get is always special, and I don't take it for granted. Thanks for my audience coming in here midday. Y'all probably at work sneaking, but I appreciate it. Those watching the show later on, give me your comments. I appreciate it. Share the show. There's another show coming up on Monday. I have the local New Orleans author Michael Zeal talking about his book, The Last Shadow. Talking about his martial arts, man. We getting it in. You know what I'm saying? Show on Peace Experience. Thank y'all. Peace.
Bye.